And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we are going to continue talking about unemployment. And we're now going to add a distinction between, or add the different types of unemployment. So when we think about unemployment, there's two categories of unemployment that economists think about, and they are the natural rate of unemployment, that's over here, and the cyclical unemployment, and that's over here. And so let's talk about the distinction between these two things. The natural rate of unemployment is kind of the normal or average unemployment. This is kind of what unemployment is over the long run. I mean, there's lots of ups and downs and so forth in employment, but the natural rate is where it is over the long run. It's kind of normal or average unemployment. So this word natural here, it refers to the unemployment that does not go away even in the long run. So why might this exist? Why might there always be unemployment that never goes away? And that's because in a growing dynamic economy, you're going to have companies that are going to go out of business, they go bankrupt, and when they do, the workers are going to be laid off and they're going to become unemployed, and it's going to take a little while until they find new jobs. And as economists, we recognize that that's normal, or what we call natural. So there's all kinds of or just somebody doesn't like their job and they quit their job and start looking for a new one, and then it takes a little time to find another job. They're unemployed during that time, but it's natural unemployment. It's something that's normal, part of the natural ups and downs of a dynamic growing economy. And then there's the cyclical unemployment. Now the cyclical unemployment, this is the year-to-year unemployment. Okay, and it's when the unemployment rate deviates from that long-run, natural, normal unemployment rate. Okay, so in the long run, you have this kind of normal long-run unemployment that happens with a normal ebb and flow of business and companies going bankrupt and workers switching jobs and so forth. But this cyclical, this is unemployment beyond just the natural stuff. Okay, and that's usually going to be like year-to-year, short-term fluctuations. Now, but before we think a little bit more about that, let's just kind of review some other concepts here very quickly. When we think about unemployment, first of all, how do we gather? And I mentioned this on a previous podcast a little bit. How do we gather all this information? How do we know if people are looking for work and can't find it? And part of that process is the population survey, which is 60,000 people per month. It's probably more than that now, but that's what it is at the time that I created this. And if you're not looking for work, or if you're under 16, then you're not counted as being in the labor force. So then you're not part of this whole unemployment discussion. Okay? Then you don't get counted. So if you're not looking, then we got to think about that labor force participation rate idea that I talked about on a previous video. But you're not counted as unemployed, and if you're under 16, you're not counted as unemployed. So then we talked about this labor force idea, which is all the people. I've said this lots of times because it's important. All the people that are employed plus all the people that are unemployed. And to be unemployed, you have to be over 16, looking for work, and you can't find it. So we've said that a bunch of times. And then once you are unemployed, once you are considered to be unemployed, then it matters whether or not you are part of kind of natural unemployment or whether you're part of the cyclical unemployment. So this graph is based on work by the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, and they give an estimate of the long-run natural rate of unemployment. This is kind of the normal stuff that is a result of companies going bankrupt and other things. And let me just interrupt myself here a second. I just want to make sure that you can clearly see my sources. There's my source. Okay, so let me get back at it. So this is my source of for this from the Federal Bank Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. And like I was saying, they're measuring the natural rate of unemployment over time, and that's unemployment that is normal, that happens in a dynamic economy. And so this is kind of where we expect unemployment to be. And then here's the actual unemployment rate is in blue. And you can see that natural unemployment rate deviates from the natural rate. Okay, this is the actual. When you collect the employment statistics, that's the actual unemployment rate. And this is the natural, where we kind of expect it to be. And you can see since 2008, there's been a significant, and this happens during recessions, the actual unemployment becomes a lot higher than what we expected, than the natural rate of unemployment. And this in here, this is what we called the cyclical unemployment. That's what we were saying here on the previous slide here. That's this cyclical unemployment right here, is when we deviate from the natural rate of unemployment. So based on based on all the information that we have about our economy and population and things like this, economists would have been guessing in 2011 that the unemployment rate might be, the natural rate might be like 6.8 or something like that. But in actuality, it was more like 9 to 10%. And that's the cyclical unemployment. That's the additional unemployment above and beyond the normal. And that cyclical unemployment is going to be really important to thinking about macroeconomics later on. So it's important to compare the natural normal unemployment to the actual unemployment. And when the actual unemployment is above the natural rate, that's called cyclical unemployment. That will make more sense when we connect that to other things on future podcasts. And then the last thing to think more about this is the natural rate of unemployment is going to be made up of two types of unemployment that we'll talk about later on. They're called frictional and structural unemployment. So we'll come back to that here in a little bit. But that natural rate of unemployment, again, there's that normal long run rate of unemployment that includes now what I'm going to call frictional and structural unemployment. I'll talk more about those on a future video. And the cyclical unemployment is any deviation from that long run. It's any deviation from that long run rate of unemployment. So let me just cover this back up and open the side over here. So here we can see on these formulas what this all looks like. Kind of mathematically, the natural rate of unemployment is frictional and structural unemployment. Again, I will define these later. For now, this is just the natural rate of unemployment. And then the actual rate of unemployment is the natural rate of unemployment, which is made up of this frictional and structural stuff that we'll talk about later, plus the cyclical. See, that's why the cyclical is anytime the natural deviates, anytime the actual unemployment deviates from the natural rate. What makes the unemployment rate deviate from what we expected? And that would be cyclical unemployment. So the natural rate and the actual rate are equal when cyclical unemployment equals 0. When cyclical unemployment does not equal 0, then the actual unemployment rate will deviate from the natural. And that is typically happening during recessions. And that's really what causes this cyclical unemployment, is when you go into a recession. Another way of saying this is cyclical unemployment is unemployment that is caused by the recessionary phase of the business cycle. So unemployment, the actual unemployment, is equal to the natural rate unless you fall into a recession and you get cyclical unemployment. People are being laid off because companies are shutting down during the recession, and that causes the actual unemployment rate to rise above the natural level. And that's what we were looking at on this previous graph. That's what we were looking at here since 2008. Okay, since 2008, recession, and that causes the cyclical unemployment to go up and make the actual unemployment rate be above the natural rate. That's kind of the idea of what's going on over here in terms of these formulas. So we'll talk more about, coming up here on future podcasts, we'll talk more about these frictional, structural, and cyclical unemployments, and see if we can explain and make sense of all this. All right, thanks for joining me. This has been Mr. Hagan on another podcast, and we'll see you on the next podcast.